Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. I'm your host, Jace.
I'm Manny.
And I'm Comic Boom.
And this is our Comic Source Awards for 2020. Apologize, they're a little later than usual. And I'm just going to blame 2020/2021 because I was just telling my coworker and Manny earlier today, like, man, 2021 just feels like 2020 on repeat, man.
Yeah.
It's tough out there. So hopefully we're going to bring you a little bit of joy talking about some of these best comics. I'm vowing right now, you have me on record as saying next year, we'll do better next year. We'll get them out more timely fashion next year. But it was a great year for comics, man. I know Manny didn't necessarily feel the same way. I'll let him talk about it in a second. But for me, maybe it was the fact that I've read more comics than ever before, being at home and not going to conventions and being on the road. As busy as I was with the day job, man, I read so many comics, so many great comics in 2020. It really was a tough year in terms of choosing. Like, I have more honorable mentions than I ever have had before, way more honorable mentions. So that being said, we're going to break this into two parts. You guys, we usually end up somewhere between 2.5, 3 hours. So we're going to break it up into two episodes. So it'll be a little easier for you guys to digest. But yeah, I thought it was a great year for comics. You didn't feel the same way, Manny. What were your thoughts about 2020 overall?
So it's funny. I'm talking to my girlfriend about it over dinner. Bless her heart for paying attention to me ramble on about it. Because I looked through the entire year's catalog week to week to week, meticulously looking for things that I may have forgotten. Maybe I just missed. I just found out there was a lot of things out this year that I wasn't interested in. There's no big events really that wowed me. There was a couple of series here and there that I found fantastic. But even Batman for me was lackluster. And then we know how we feel about death metal. Three Jokers fell flat. And I guess what I conveyed was because my favorite titles fell flat, my favorite characters, I think it turned me off from even in some independent books that maybe I would have picked up along the way. And then plus that and my job has made it a little bit more difficult now that I'm a lot more involved in the TV and movie side with LRM. So I had to pay so much more closer attention to TV shows and movies, and it was strange because it's never been that way. I've always had easier picks than I did this year, or 1 or 2, 3 for everything, kind of like you're saying. But yeah, and then I think also that I'm looking at the current state and what's going forward, and I feel the exact same way. Like, I don't really know what to be excited about. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Like, I think, especially in terms of the, there weren't any events that really were like, oh, that event was great, or whatever. And yeah, I'm saying that was a great year for comics, but when you look at my list, there's less Marvel and DC less DC than there's ever been. So really, it was a great year for independent, I think it is what we're coming down to. So yeah, if you weren't plugged into that scene, yeah, there might have been a lot of stuff that you missed. What about you, Boom? How'd you feel about 2020 overall?
I actually share I share your and Manny's sentiments. I'm a pretty big DC guy, and DC just wasn't filled with hope this year. And death metal was very much a disappointment for me. I think it embodied everything that I never associated with DC before. I really didn't like it. But the reason why I'm choosing to be optimistic about 2020 is that I actually credit 2020 with giving me a far better appreciation of indie comics, because I collected more indie comics than I ever have in my life. And I'm now I'm collecting fewer and fewer of the big two. I'm only down to 2 or 3 Marvel. And yeah, so I appreciate 2020 for what it made me respect and appreciate the indie market more. And I'm actually curious to see what you guys chose for this list, these categories that we're going to be going through.
Yeah, so I'm going to run down a quick list of what the categories are. So first is Best New Hero or Hero Team. So that's a hero or team who debuted in a book that was released in 2020. Best New Villain or Villain Team. So same criteria there as hero. We have Best New Ongoing Comic. So that's a comic that first started in 2020. Best Limited Series. That one means the last the last book shipped in 2020, which that we'll talk about a little more when we get there. It makes it kind of weird. Best single or one shot, best cliffhanger or moment, best storyline, best sleeper or surprise hit, best ongoing comic, best graphic novel or graphic album. So that could be like a reprint or an art book, something like that. Best or favorite cover, best artist, best cover artist, best writer / artist. So that's a creator who handled both. Best inker, best color artist, best new talent, most underrated book, our biggest disappointment of 2020, which that list could be long. Best comic story, and that's like a comic news story, not necessarily a story in the book. And then most anticipated moment of or upcoming series of 2021. So let's kick it off with best new hero or hero team. What do you got, Manny?
So I didn't necessarily find a character specifically that I liked until I found one that fit the purpose of TV and comic books necessarily. But I picked for a new hero, I picked Ryan Wilder on Batgirl 50 because of the fact of the impact that she's going to be having, not only hopefully in comic books, but also in the TV series over at the CW. First 3 episodes have been out already. I think she's done fantastic. I actually find her a lot more interesting than Ruby Rose. And so it was good too that they did a little bit of an introduction for her in the comic books. And I look forward to see what they do with her going forward.
That's not a bad choice. Not even somebody that was on my list of people to consider. I totally forgot about her. What about you, Boom?
Well, my favorite, best new superhero or superhero team, I thought the one rare breath of fresh air for Marvel was Strange Academy. I like that. Now I suppose technically you could argue that it's not a team because it's technically just a school of heroes, but if that's the case, I'm still gonna cheat and say Strange Academy. I'm not really that familiar with all the new characters, but I really thought Scotty Young and the gang, they did a really good job. It's on issue 8 right now. And between it excited the spec market, and it wasn't just all hype. It was actually story driven spec as well. This was really good writing. It was fun, character driven. I'm enjoying getting to know these characters. I'm not a mutant fan, and the idea of a magical academy and everything, I just really like it. I think it's a great idea. I don't think it's a coincidence that DC is trying to while in my view, maybe try to copy off it a little bit with Titans Academy going into 2021. And I thought Strange Academy really hit it pretty good. In terms of best new superhero, I was going to say Erica Slaughter of Something is Killing the Children, but I think that's cheating because it came out in September of 2019. So I can't say that. So I would have to go with Adventure Man, Matt Fraction and the Dodsons, the lead character in that series. I've really enjoyed that. A runner-up for me would be Catgirl in the one issue of Catwoman, but I refuse to say Naomi because I thought that was rather underwhelming.
Yeah, actually, Naomi, she might have been 2019 also.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
So. All right, those are some.
What about yourself, Jace?
Yeah, so I actually had like a lot of my choices, so many to choose from. So Amara Bishop, Miles to Go. You're going to hear me mention Miles to Go. It's a series from Aftershock. It's crime noir from B. Claymore and Stefan Molnar. You're going to hear me mention a lot of times, really under the radar. She was a great character. So I thought about her. The whole 7 Secrets, the team, the dynamic is very interesting with the secret holder and the secret keeper. That's from Tom Taylor. And I'm going to butcher this name. Daniele Di Nicuolo, I think is how you say it. He's Italian. So I thought about 7 Secrets. The whole Space Armada and We Only Find Them When They're Dead is very interesting from Al Ewing. I also thought, part of this is I try to think about heroes or hero teams that are going to be like impactful going forward, right? Like they're going to show up. So that's why I thought, well, even that being said, I couldn't pick Clown Hunter because he's just a terrible character. But I did think about the Chronicler, who we saw in Dark Knight's Death Metal Rise of New God #1 from Tynan Brian Hill with art by Jesus Moreno, because I think that Chronicler, he basically could be the DC Universe version of the Watcher if they want to be. And so I thought, maybe I'll pick him. Same kind of thing. L'Oreal from Captain Marvel #18, first appearance, Kelly Thompson and Corey Smith, was another one that I considered because to me, she's almost like, she's like She-Hulk. That's who she reminds me of. Like early days of She-Hulk. She's even, got the green skin, and we're not even getting the normal She-Hulk that we all love right now. So I feel like that's part of the reason she hit so big. And the Captain Marvel 18 was going crazy on the spec market, as Boom can tell you. So I think she's somebody that we could see a lot of in the future as well. I also considered Ellipses Howell from Donny Cates crossover. She seems like a really interesting character. And the fact that her name is Ellipses, they call her L, but her name's Ellipses, which if you're not familiar, if you don't know what ellipses are, when you're writing and you see those three little, or you're reading, you see those three little dots, it's like a pregnant pause. So I thought she could be interesting, but ultimately, and again, sorry, I have so many honorable mentions. There's so many great comics. Ultimately, I chose the Commanders in Crisis from Steve Orlando and David Tinto's Commander in Crisis series, because it's not diversity for diversity's sake. Here's a team of former presidents from a multiverse. That's what the Commanders in Crisis story that Orlando is telling is about, this multiverse. It's very traditionally superheroic. The reason it's Commanders in Crisis is because they were all commanders in chief on their own worlds before they finally came to the last world. The reveal in the latest issue of it flipped everything on its head. I won't spoil it for you, but basically they were all the first presidents of something, so one of them, they were all presidents of the United States, but one was the first female president. One was the first Muslim president. One was the first homosexual president. One was the first Latin president. So they were all first. They've all, sort of broken barriers. And it's a really good series. And, throughout this, you're going to hear me name a lot of the same series over and over. I'm sure that'll be the case for all of us. But I try to spread the love around. And I wanted to give something to Commanders in Crisis. And I do think it's a great team. And their powers are interesting. They're very, not only is it a diverse cast in terms of like ethnicity and their voices and the way they sound and their personalities, but their powers are all just wildly different. Powers I've never even seen in other comics. Like it's not just super strength or invisibility or flight or what have you. One of the person's powers is she meditates and she comes up with these like new words where she'll there'll be portmanteaus where she's smashing words together. And once she utters the word, it's like a magic spell that sort of changes all of reality based on whatever she said. So if she wants to raise a specific person from the dead, which she tries to avoid doing, but eventually they need to do it. And so she comes up with this word that will only affect this one guy to raise him from the dead. And there's other things like that. So that's just a really cool concept for a power, hey, let me think up this new word and it's going to cause this change to reality, almost like a Scarlet Witch kind of power. So that was my choice, Commanders in Crisis for best new hero or hero team. Moving on to best new villain or villain team. You go first, Boom. Who do you got?
This might sound cliche, but I really think I think she's even underrated, and that is Punchline. I think that I know that a lot of people hate her and that she was just a bunch of hype, but I don't think she is. I think she's by far the most relevant and by far the most interesting. I think she is a very timely villain. I think that she goes beyond just being a villain, because I think she's very reflective of just a lot of people in general, particularly now. And maybe I think people hate the character because she's just too close to home, quite frankly, especially if you factor in politics, the way people manipulate the media, manipulate things online. That's what Punchline does. And she's perfect for the Joker. You don't know what the truth is with Punchline. She's currently facing charges in the DCU because of her role in Joker War, but we all know she's going to be found not guilty. She can manipulate the media, and I think she's a force to be reckoned with. And I do think she is very much a darker Harley Quinn. And frankly, I think we need one, with Harley Quinn going now toward the side of the angel, so to speak, particularly in 2021. We know Harley Quinn's going to be getting a title with Batman and Harley Quinn, plus her own title, plus who knows what else. Her rekindling her magic and her relationship with Poison Ivy. I think it's very, I think there's a vacancy in what used to be the traditional Harley Quinn role, and that's going to be filled with Punchline, but in a much darker capacity and a much more disturbing capacity. And I just think that that character took off in 2020, and deservedly so.
Yeah, she didn't make my list, but when you're talking about like characters that are going to have a lasting impact, I totally agree with you that she could be somebody that you could see for a long time to come. I pick her just because I don't really care for her as a character.
Yeah.
I mean, she is, but she is on my list. I was going to mention her if nobody else did, just because I think, yeah, she will have a lasting impact. So I've got, this is one of my smaller, there's only a few to mention. The cities themselves, from Join the Future, Zach Kaplan and Peter Kowalski, where, you know, it's the push and pull between rural, like farming communities that have a lot of independence versus these giant mega cities. And the mega cities come in, they try to recruit the people. Apparently it's important to have the biggest population for some reason. It's never really explained that well. But they come in, they recruit people from the rural areas, and they send these machines to terraform, literally, you know, removes their town. They're just so insidious, right? They're offering you, hey, here's technology. You get universal basic income. You get healthcare, you know, you never don't have anything to eat. There's no starvation. There's no disease. It's just so insidious. And you not realizing you're giving up your independence until it's too late. So I like that concept, but I know that's kind of esoteric. So ultimately I didn't choose that. Also, along the same lines as Punchline, I thought it was important to mention Ghostmaker, who I find to be a much more interesting villain than Punchline. You know, same thing though, right? From James Tynan's Batman run, Batman 100, James Tynan and Jorge Jimenez. I know Manny doesn't like his look, but I actually love it. So I have to mention him. The Sword Bearers of Araco from the 10 of Swords crossover. There's 10 of them, so I'll read them off real fast. Redroot, Pog, Urpog, Bay the Blood Moons, Solum, Iska the Unbeaten, the White Sword of the Celestial Spire, Death, War, Summoner, and Annihilation. So from Jonathan Hickman and Teeny Howard, Pepe Larraz did the character designs. That's a big story, and it's hard to just pick one or the other because they're such a team. They're so closely tied together. But being that the X-Men series and titles aren't going anywhere anytime soon, you can see one or all of these guys or multiples of them showing up for years to come. So I thought it was important to mention them. But ultimately, I went with Judge Taylor from Stillwater by Chip Zdarsky and Ramon Perez. First appearance in Stillwater #2. And it's kind of along the same lines as what Boom was just talking about with Punchline, you know, kind of reflecting the real world. Here's a guy who starts off, and he's probably not that bad. He has the best of intentions. He just wants to protect his town, and he doesn't see how truly fascist and evil he's become. Now he sort of rules it with an iron fist. Nobody's allowed to leave. And he's just one of those comic characters that you just, you know, you read what he says and you see how he acts and you wish you could like reach into the panel and just strangle the guy because he's such a total prick. So anybody that can, you know, elicit that emotional response from me. And plus I thought it was somebody that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think of. But yeah, Judge Taylor, he's a bad guy. And what makes him part of him so bad or so evil is the fact that you're aware of people that are just like him in real life. You know, that's a realistic villain. Somebody that acts the way that he does. So that's who I went with. What about you, Manny?
I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that Ghost Killer is more interesting than Punchline. I mean, it's just almost like a carbon copy of what Bruce Wayne went through, and I didn't find that interesting. While, yeah, Punchline I think has a better hope of lasting impression, especially with the way that storylines have been used recently. Not that saying that I like them, but you know, with the social justice and media perception and all that kind of things, I just it's made more sense, I think, for me at least. That's my opinion on it. For my pick for best new villain, I picked T-Rex Batman. Oh no, I'm just kidding.
I was what, dude. There were so many Batman matchups you could choose from.
Dr. Pat Hatton.
Castle Batman. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, so my pick actually goes on future potential rather than the execution of the story she was in right now, and I picked Liar Liar and Wonder Woman 759. So her real name is Emma Deropoulos. So also that's my daughter's name, so that helps also. She is the daughter of Maxwell Lord and was part of that storyline that was supposed to be so good with Mariko Tamaki and oh shoot, I just had that.
Mikel Yanin.
Yeah, Mikel Yanin. And then it just didn't happen. I don't know what happened. We talked about it several times. And the story just went off the rails and not at all what he had expected. But
Very much so.
The character itself, I think she has huge potential in the future. She'd be a great villain for like Young Justice, Teen Titans. She could be part of another group that comes back. Obviously, still for Wonder Woman, she can team up with her dad. Well, I get it. She tried to kill him, so that's probably not going to happen. But there's a lot of potential for her character, a lot of room for growth, especially now that they're trying to push younger characters. Also, I think that she's going to have a lasting impression going forward. Maybe not necessarily right now, but I think that she's a good character to develop a little bit more of, given that there was a lot left there that could have been explored in that series rather than going to Miami or dealing with Vertigo.
Yep, I agree. It's not a bad pick at all. I didn't even think about her, but yeah, she definitely has potential. All right. Next category is Best New Ongoing Comic. So this is a comic that first appeared on the stands in 2020, not the cover date. So your turn to go first, Manny. What do you got?
So I picked, I don't know if this counts, but I picked it because I really enjoy it. And it started and it's still going on this year. I picked Strange Adventures by, who else other than Tom King, with artwork by Mitch Gerrards and Evan Doc Shanner. And the reason being, I mean, it's just such a good mystery. It's such a good story, I feel. And it's a really good follow-up to if you really enjoyed Mr. Miracle, I think that this is a terrific book because it follows, this mysterious story of really what happened to Adam Strange, because he's really known as the hero of Ran, and is it really all that it seems or not? Then we also follow the mystery through the eyes of Mr. Terrific, and so far, it's that typical Tom King story where you got to really pay attention to some of the clues and some of the panels, because it's all going to come back, and and it's going to be one of those books, I know it, where I'm going to have to go back and read the whole thing. But so far, as I'm reading it issue to issue, I really, really enjoy it. There's the backstory of the war on Ran, and then there's what's currently happening between him and Alana on Earth. So I really like it. And I think last week we left off, it was starting to hit a turning point finally after being a lull a little bit. Really great art. Obviously, we don't, nothing less from Mitch. And it's another one of those series. I also thought of putting Rorschach there because that's been really good. I didn't necessarily like the first issue very much, but as the issues have progressed, the mystery of it all and putting it all together, same thing. Tom King does that type of story very, very well. I feel like he should kind of maybe stick to some of these stories a little bit more than trying to take on 100 issues of Batman. We kind of see where his strength is. And so, for that reason, it's just super enjoyable and it makes me want the next issue, makes me think. And so and it's not a character that I wasn't necessarily too familiar with. So it's made me kind of appreciate Adam Strange a little bit more.
Fair enough. What about you, Boom? Best new series?
Well, first I should make a comment on Tom King. I do say that I would agree with Manny that Rorschach and even Strange Adventures were actually they're definitely in Tom King's wheelhouse. So they're actually, I found myself enjoying Tom King, and I'm so glad he got off Batman. But yes. There are so many other indie titles, and you mentioned a couple of them all already, Jason, in your previous comments on other categories, but Seven Secrets with Tom Taylor, Donny Cates' crossover, Al Ewing's We Only Find Them When They're Dead, Chip Zdarsky's Stillwater. I have to pick from those because I had all those. I have them listed here, and I got to say right now I just happen to be captivated the most by Stillwater, with a close second with We Only Find Them When They're Dead. I think Stillwater is great. The idea of a small town where run by a corrupt mayor who becomes corrupt over many decades because no one in the town ages, and the fact that they they always seem to heal. They can't die. And the way it affects the politics of the town and the corruption and the way people think and the way they interact and their customs. I think it's got such potential. It's a future Netflix show just waiting to explode because it's such a great idea. I got to go with Stillwater, with honorable mention to We Only Find Them When They're Dead. I love Al Ewing's idea of floating gods in the galaxy, and the bodies of these old gods are basically being mined for their energies and source materials, and I'm inferring that part of the agenda of We Only Find Them When They're Dead is that one of the explorers wants to actually revive one of these dead gods with an agenda of his own, and just these stories are different. They're unique and they're outside the realm of, like I say, the big two that have sort of, I think Marvel and DC have sort of underwhelmed in 2020. And so these types of stories, Stillwater, We Only Find Them When They're Dead, are just a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Do you get a little bit of a Battlestar Galactica vibe from We Only Find Them When They're Dead? Like the original?
Yeah, a little bit, and and I have to say that it caps. I'm not sure what to make of it. I'm a little bit on edge with We Only Find Them When They're Dead, and I'm not really sure why. I really don't know where the story is headed, but it's got me intrigued, and that doesn't happen very often to me when I read a comic book. And so I hope, I'm prepared for anything at this point, and so I got to give kudos to Al Ewing.
Yeah, that's a good series for sure. All right. Well, I think this is the category where I had more series to mention than any, and a couple that Boom already mentioned. So I thought so first of all, I should say I have 12 places. Ultimately, I picked one, but
wow.
Of those only 3. So I have 3 Marvel titles, 9 independents, no DC at all. So It goes back to what I was saying earlier at the top of the show about how independent is starting to take over. But one of the Marvel titles is Spider-Woman by Carla Pacheco and Pierre Perez. Also, the new Black Widow series from Kelly Thompson with art by Elena Casagrande is really good. And the new Iron Man from Christopher Cantwell and Cafu, I'm really, really enjoying. That one's tough, though, because we've only gotten, I think, 4. We only got 4 issues, so it's hard to say. The other ones, we got a few more. But I already mentioned Commanders in Crisis, but that's new and an incredible series. We Only Find Them When They're Dead, we just talked about. 7 Secrets has already been mentioned several times. Tom Taylor and Danielle De Niculo. That is such a great series, man. I'm telling you, it's so good. It's got that like Wanted or Kingsman kind of vibe with the secret society saving the world behind the scenes. It's so great. The X Factor series from Leah Williams and David Baldione. Currently the X-Men, all the mutants are coming back all the time, and it's great that somebody finally acknowledged. Well, it's great that we can resurrect these people. But these mutants, but shouldn't we be finding out how they died in case there's something going on that we need to know about? So that's a great series. Firepower from Robert Kirkman and Chris Samney. In my mind, I always try out new Robert Kirkman series. Everybody does because they're thinking, hey, this could be the next Walking Dead. There's never going to be another Walking Dead. There's never going to be a book that Robert Kirkman ever puts out on #1 that flies under the radar and you can make the kind of money you made on Walking Dead. I'm telling you right now, it's just not going to happen. But his books sell because people think, hey, there's a chance. Well, I've tried, and I'm kind of right there with you. I don't want to miss out on the next Walking Dead either. And so I've tried every series Kirkman's put out since The Walking Dead. This is his best one, and it's not close. Invincible was pretty good, but in my mind, this is a better premise it's a more original premise than Invincible. If you're fans of things like the David Carradine Kung Fu show back in the day, or Black Belt Theater, like used to come on Saturday afternoons when I was a kid and show those old dubbed martial arts movies. This is right in there, man. If you're a fan of like Street Fighter with the whole Ayugan fireball, the guy makes fireballs just like that. He's the only one that can. But the fact that Kirkman and Somni have him make the Ayugan, gesture with his hands, that's just great. So I almost picked that. Stillwater we mentioned. Department of Truth by James Tynion and Martin Simons is revelatory. It's almost too realistic with what's going on in the world right now. And there's also The Scumbag from Rick Remender and Louis LaRosa, which is so funny and depraved, but almost too depraved, so I couldn't pick it. Sometimes it makes makes your butthole pucker book sometimes. It's so gross. You're just like, ugh. So ultimately what I went with was Crossover by Donnie Cates with art by Jeff Shaw. And it's so great. And Donnie's a great writer. I'm sure his name's going to come up over and over during these awards. But the reason ultimately that I chose crossover over everything is because not only is it a great story, not only is it a cool premise, it is such a huge celebration of comics and what comics are. In a way, it's like giving the award to comics in general, just with these cool, crazy ideas, and it's awesome. So ultimately, that's what I went with. And if you're not familiar with the story, real quick, it's basically one day in this world, all of a sudden, there's like a rip in reality, and all these superheroes from every universe, from DC, from Marvel, from Valiant, from anywhere you can think of, they all start pouring through, and it's basically a real life come to their reality, big giant summer crossover event. If every comic book company and character ever had a giant summer crossover, and there was a mashup, and it tore the fabric of reality, and they ended up in this town and started destroying things or whatever in the midst of their fighting. And so they put a giant dome over, I want to say it's Pittsburgh. No, it's Denver. It's Denver.
I can't remember.
I can't remember. But anyway, I think Pittsburgh is the Oblivion song. But anyway, over this giant city that it's in, they put a big dome over that, and everybody just tries to go on with their lives and pretend that it's not happening. But because of that, the whole idea of liking comics or reading comics, it becomes like taboo. Like nobody wants to admit they like superheroes or like comics or whatever, because no, they're bad. These heroes actually exist, and there's people trapped under the dome and things like that. So it's a great series, and it's very meta. We've already seen name drops of a bunch of other comic creators, and we've even seen other comic characters that you wouldn't expect show up in the series. So that's what I went with ultimately. So all right, up next is best limited series. Go ahead, Boom. What do you have for your best limited series?
Well, I have the three that stood out the most to me is Join the Future by Zach Kaplan and Peter Kowalski, Spider-Man Life Story by Trip Zdarsky, and Wonder Woman Dead Earth by Daniel Warren Johnson. And the one that I went with ultimately is this was so difficult. I almost feel like calling it a tie, to be honest with you, because I'm a huge Wonder Woman fan. I would squeak out. It's a tie. Join the Future was such a breath of fresh air with Zach Kaplan and Peter Kowalski. But Wonder Woman Dead Earth, I love the Daniel Warren Johnson, his artistic style for Wonder Woman. I'm surprised DC let him write the story. Wonder Woman actually is largely responsible through her actions in the Amazons in the story for the destruction of the earth, pretty much, and a dystopian future, and the redemption quest that Diana ultimately finds herself on. It's actually a Wonder Woman story like you've never read before. And in issue 3, it's a Black Label book. And issue 3, you will not find a more visceral battle between Wonder Woman and Superman ever. She literally rips apart Superman, disembowels him, stabs him repeatedly with kryptonite. It is one of the most viscerally violent scenes you'll ever read. And it's Wonder Woman eviscerating Superman. Unbelievable. But there's actually a story there. I didn't just, it wasn't just I liked it because of the violence. It actually is a story of redemption, and it's character driven, which is even more surprising. And I have to go with just squeaking out with Wonder Woman Dead Earth. I don't want to cheat and rob you guys of talking about Join for the Future if maybe one of you chose that, but Zach Kaplan's story really caught me off guard. I completely got it by fluke the first issue. I kept with it. I'm so glad I did. The idea of sort of like you mentioned it before, Jace, the idea of the cities themselves almost being the villain, villainous, like eating up the countryside and eating up the old ways of life. And this lone girl, she's like a female Clint Eastwood, but the pale rider, but we get her at the beginning of her sort of origin, where learning how to shoot a gun and meeting up with an old gunfighter and ultimately finding her own, and ultimately that first story arc ending with her sort of getting a victory over the men that come from the city to to deal with her. And again, another very much a character-driven tale. Definitely, like I said, I feel compelled to say it's a tie with Wonder Woman Dead Earth.
All right. It wouldn't be the first time we've had a tie. I think actually this is the first time I don't have a tie. I almost always have. I think last year I had like 3 ties. So no, ties are perfectly okay. All right, Manny, what do you have for a limited series?
I can't believe I didn't have Join the Future on my list for a limited series. I feel so horrible now because I read it so long ago. Because Zach would send it to us early that I don't know how I don't know.
Yeah, when you were struggling with limited series, I told you Aftershock, man. They're all limited. They're all limited.
Yeah, and then actually that Wonder Woman book is one of the ones that I was talking about that I need to go back and read. I did flip a little bit, and I was like, man, this looks freaking bonkers for a Wonder Woman book. I was pretty sure I was going to enjoy it. So I thought those were very good picks. For me, I went with an Aftershock title by Ryan Parrott. We're talking about Dead Day. It's an interesting concept, and it's written by Ryan Parrott with art by Evgeny Bornyakov and Juancho Velez on colors. So the premise of the book is really the idea that once a year the dead will rise. And what is interesting about it is that some people have these rituals for it. Some people use it as a time to get back with their families. But there's going to be a couple of people here and there that use that time to get back at those that wrong them. And that's something that's explored in this limited series. So as it feels like an event, and it's actually a really good book. It has an interesting concept where what happens to a woman who has a family, but somebody who she really cared for comes back and needs her help. Somebody she was in a very intimate relationship with. And so Ryan Parrott does a really good job in this series, and she gives a lot to do to the family themselves, each their own. And in the whole thing, it tells a good story, and it wraps it all up nicely in a bow for you. So very satisfying. That's the way I describe it. So that's my pick.
Yeah, and if that sounds intriguing to you, listeners, I just talked to Ryan Parrott actually on our last Aftershock Monday episode. So if you want to hear more from the writer himself,
be sure to check that out.
Yeah, be sure and go and check that out. So Dead Days was on my list as well. Maestro from Peter David and Herman Peralta, which based on the first issue might have won, but then it kind of each issue it got subsequently not as good. It definitely was a high point at the first issue, but it was still worth reading. Wind by James Tynion and Michael Dylanos was also on my list. I thought that was very good. Undone by Blood or Shadow of a Wanted Man by Zach Thompson, Lonnie Nadler, and Sammy Kisvilla. That was on there as well. That's already been optioned. We already know there's going to be another one. That's set in the 70s, a girl trying to solve the murder of her family. It goes back to the town where they were killed. And at the same time, there's this other narrative of the book she's reading, which is a Western of kind of like a Clint Eastwood Man with No Name kind of character who's on his own similar quest. And so she's drawing inspiration from the book, and you're getting both stories. It's so well done, critically acclaimed, and there's a good reason for that. Also from Aftershock, The Man Who Effed Up Time by John Layman and Carl Mostert. It's so tough with these Aftershock books because so many of them are so good. Excuse me. And I feel like they don't get enough attention, but they can only fit in limited series because they're not ongoing. They're always 5 or 6 issues for the most part. There's a few exceptions like Animosity obviously comes to mind. But they're so good, and I wish that more people were paying attention. Join the Future I also considered. But ultimately, I chose something that only had a couple of issues come out in 2020. And this is the whole thing I was talking about where because of the way we set it up, there has to be a delineation. So we always do a limited series has to end in 2020. So I feel like the momentum of this series was kind of in 2019. And since it ended like in February, it doesn't feel as exciting. now, as opposed to, some of these other ones that I've read more recently. But I still have to give my nod, because I remember in when we did the best of 2019, wanting to give this best limited series and not being able to, because it hadn't yet ended. We only had 10 issues come out. So it's Freedom Fighters from Robert Venditti, Eddie Barrows, Eber Ferreira, and Antonio Fabela. It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite, one of the few DC, maybe the only, no, not the only, but one of the few DC award winners that I have. It's just really great. It's taking that concept of Earth X, the Fawcett heroes that DC purchased way back in the day. So like Uncle Sam and Black Condor and Doll Man and Human Bomb, and bringing them over to the DC universe, and then throwing them on Earth X, where it was always World War II. Whenever anybody traveled to Earth X, it was always World War II, and they never moved beyond that. Well, Venditti finally moves beyond that, and it's not a most original concept. What if the Nazis won the war? So actually, when the series starts, it's the day that JFK got assassinated, which there is no JFK presidency, because again, the Nazis won the war, but that's the day that still is horrific in the history of America, because that's the day where the freedom fighters finally get caught and assassinated by the Third Reich. And so that's how it starts out. But then you fast forward to modern times, and it's the rise of a new generation of freedom fighters that are trying to restore faith in America. And with that faith and belief that America can overcome, that Uncle Sam, that's how he derives his powers. People have to believe in him so that he can manifest and be powerful. And it's a 12-issue maxi series. The art by Eddie Barrows is next level. The colors by Antonio Fabela. Based on his color work in this Freedom Fighter series is the reason he was my best colorist of 2019. It's a fantastic story. It's fully available. All 12 issues have come out. You can go pick it up in trade. I highly, highly recommend it. You don't have to know anything about any other DC canon, what's going on in death metal or anything else. It stands on its own, and it's a fantastic story. So I had to give it my best limited series of.
I applaud you for that. I'm glad you did. I completely forgot. It ended so early in 2020.
Yep.
It was. I completely forgot about Freedom Fighters. I love it too, and Eddie Burroughs' art is just fantastic.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like I said, with the limited series, because of the way if it gets, the last issue comes out in January, we throw it the following year. But by that, by the time 11 months go by, we've forgotten. So I definitely didn't want to leave it out. All right. Up next, we're doing best single issue or one shot. This was a really easy one for me. I thought, like, immediately I knew what I was going to pick. And then at the last minute, I thought about something else, which is kind of in that same predicament that Freedom Fighters is in. So I put it here just so I could mention it. It's Other History of the DC Universe #1, written by John Ridley, art by Giuseppe Camincola, Andrea Cucci, and Jose Villarrubia on colors. I couldn't put it in, ongoing, and it's only a 3 issue. So, I could have put it in limited, but only 1 issue came out in 2020. But it is so amazing, and it blew me away when I read it. It was so touching. It's basically, like it says, the other history of the DC universe. We're going through momentous events in the DC universe that also tie in, which is what is amazing about what Ridley does. He ties in real world events, civil rights kind of things and other big events that are kind of milestones or touch points in the history of America. But the reason it's the other history is because so much of DC's history is about these male white heroes, right? Or even female white heroes to a lesser extent. But where's the story of the minority heroes who maybe didn't have that same experience, who weren't beloved the way Superman is, or feared the way Batman is, or kind of almost worshipped as a god the way Wonder Woman is, So the first issue is all about Black Lightning and the history of the DC universe through his eyes. So it's a spectacular read, and I highly, highly recommend it. So I wanted to mention it here just because I thought it was so good. But the one that immediately came to mind as soon as I started, as soon as I got to this category, as soon as I read it this year, I knew I was going to pick it. It's Dark Knight's Death Metal, The Secret Origin, from Scott Snyder, Jeff Johns, Ryan Benjamin, Jerry Ordway, Francis Manapul, Richard Friend, Norm Ratman, Paul Pelletier, and a ton of colorists they did an incredible job of redeeming, to some extent, finally, Superboy Prime, who, when he made his first appearance way back in the day in DC Comics Presents and in the first Crisis, he was a favorite of mine. He was a Superboy that embodied the best things about Superman. And while I understood what they did with him in Infinite Crisis, to some extent, I didn't like the fact that they had him do a heel turn and he turned into this whiny sort of character that was the kind of the voice of the fanboy. And all he ever wanted to do was go back home, go back to his own universe where he didn't even have powers necessarily. And I've been wanting it for years. And finally they did it. And not only did they do it, they did it right, to the point where I was smiling from ear to ear. I was almost getting misty eyed when I read it. It just checked all the boxes. It was like, wow, here's a character I've loved forever and haven't liked as much based on what they did. But even what they did was interesting with the character, and it always made sense. And I never thought I would see him redeemed ever. And so to be able to have that happen, I had to give my nod to it. And if for no other reason, I'm happy Death Metal happened because of that one issue. So what about you, Manny? Single issue.
No one's happy Death Metal happened, Jace.
And I'm happy because Superboy Prime got redeemed.
Mine was a hands down easy pick for me on multiple levels. I'm such a fan of Ice Cream Man by W. Maxwell Prince. And so my pick had to be the Ice Cream Man Presents Quarantine Comic Special, which came out in, I think it's originally June digitally, and then it was released in print in September. Reason being is originally this series was put together digitally, small stories, in order to collect money for struggling shops. They were the money that was raised by buying some of these smaller stories online digitally was donated. The digital proceeds, 50% of them were donated to Comic Book United Fund to help the struggling shops, because, as you know, as everybody knows, 2020 closed them down for a while because they were quote unquote non-essential. But we would argue that, of course. But the stories did well enough that they decided to take this issue and put it all together in print. And 50% of these proceeds were also going to be donated to the same cause to help out struggling shops, which I think is a fantastic gesture from them, just being the fact that Ice Cream Man was such a great, to me, it still is such a great series. Very, very original stories, I think, and very thoughtful and mind-bending sometimes, and all surrounding this one Ice Cream Man character. And so to have kind of guest writers, I thought was really interesting and really fun. You have one by called Nature Calls by Declan Shalvey with Chris O'Halloran. Then you have another one, Mene Mene Tekel Up Harrison by Denise Camp and Artyom Toplin. And then Creature Causeway by Al Ewing and PJ Holden. Small by Christopher Cantwell and Eon Maron with Chris O'Halloran. And then you have a lot of artwork in it. So, I mean, overall, you get your bang for your buck. You get very, very good small stories, and then you also get to help a bigger cause when you got this book. And just like every other Ice Cream Man book, I don't think you'd be disappointed. And then even further, they came out with a variant cover, which was metallic, and that was a beautiful cover, which I had in my hands, and I was going to buy it, but I couldn't. At the time, I couldn't justify paying so much for that variant cover, and I still haunts me to this day, the fact that I didn't get it. I can see his eyes just peering at me in disappointment. Sorry, Ice Cream Man. Yeah, that's my
Ice Cream Man's judging you.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Boom, what do you got?
I got to be honest, I never really felt that there was a one shot for me this year that stood out for me. I've never been a Superboy Prime fan. I've always hated the character, quite frankly, and I think I actually credit Superboy Prime for ruining Infinite Crisis. It's one of the reasons why Infinite Crisis was, I think, not a particularly good crisis. It's because it started off, well, that's a topic for another day. Suffice to say, but I have to agree with you that it was a very well written story. In Death Metal Secret Origin, it was a good redemption story for Superboy Prime. I can objectively say that and put aside my bias. I'm just not a fan of the character. I read one issue of Ice Cream Man, and it was very good, and I regret not collecting that series. I'm sure that because each individual of Ice Cream Man, I understand, are all just a collection of different stories. So any one of them, I'm sure, would have been a one shot for me. I do have I guess you could call a one shot, but I'm going to save that for the best graphic novel category. So I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to contribute much to this particular category.
All right, no problem. Let's move on to best cliffhanger or moment. I think you're up first, Manny.
So this was actually a real easy one for me, and I don't even know why it was such a moment for me, but it just worked for me, and I was like, what the heck? What's going on here? It comes in Suicide Squad number 5 by Tom Taylor, where the Suicide Squad finds out that the person who's pulling the strings on Amanda Waller and then coincidentally pulling their strings is Ted Kord, which was a shock to me. And it was different because I got excited just because of the possibilities of seeing somebody who's not a villain, doing some nefarious things. Obviously, the story unfolds and you find out it's Black Mask and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But at that moment, that reveal for me, it did it for me when they pull out the phone and it's his picture. And then we kind of see a couple of issues later, him trying to stop the Suicide Squad from acquiring different information or take some from him. I just thought it added a different element to the story, a little bit of controversy, and it was fun. And then I think that's what for a Suicide Squad book, that's what it should be. I also like the fact that I was seeing somebody else pull on Amanda Waller strings that was frustrating her. So that was my moment. That reveal when it was supposedly Ted Kord that was behind all of the things that Suicide Squad was doing.
All right, what do you have, Boom?
First, I want to compliment Manny. I love that issue of Suicide Squad. I love that entire series. I wish it would continue. Great choice. My favorite, and I'm almost tempted because I don't want to take the wind out of Jace. You probably have a whole slew of different options here, but because I got more than one. But I'll just state my favorite, and this was close, but no, I would have to go.
Your honorable mentions too. It does.
Okay.
There's plenty to do.
All right. Well, I will then. I love that the revelation at the end of Department of Truth that the head of the Department of Truth is none other than Lee Harvey Oswald.
Good one.
I thought that was so awesome because that, like, honest to God, I admit it was kind of like, it was an okay premise, but when I got to that last page and he said Lee Harvey Oswald, it was like all of a sudden it was like I perked up. It was like I just got an adrenaline rush. Oh my God! Suddenly I was like,
yep.
This suddenly became more real to me because I've always been into I'm not a huge conspiracy buff, but I got to admit I'm kind of drowned in. I've read a lot of books on the Kennedy assassination, and so that's just like perked me right up. I go, this is awesome. So there's definitely that one. The next one for me was I loved Wonder Woman chainsawing the Batman Who Laughs at the end of the opening issue. I was so disappointed that the Batman Who Laughs wasn't dead. I actually thought it had gravitas because I actually thought the Batman Who Laughs was actually dead, and that Wonder Woman didn't piss. She actually did something useful for a change. Unfortunately, it ended up she didn't do anything useful at all, and ended up even being more useless at the end of the series. But that's another story. At least for a brief moment in time, Wonder Woman actually was relevant and did something cool. The last time I felt that cool about Wonder Woman is when she snapped Maxwell Lord's neck. So there's that moment. And the one other one that I'll mention was Thor becoming a Herald of Galactus at the end of, I think it was Donny Cates' Thor number one, I think. That I'm not a huge Marvel zombie, but that actually intrigued me. I thought that was pretty cool as well. And I'm sure there's other Donny Cates moments on his Venom run, and there's other surprise moments in Thor that were pretty good too. And I'm gonna throw in one extra one. I love that Elektra took a Daredevil issue 25 caught all of us off guard, not just those in the speculator market, when Elektra became Daredevil while Matthew Murdock's in prison, and Matthew Murdock tells Elektra Nachos that, I don't trust you. I don't believe that you can be much of an ally because you kill and you have no morality. And she's trying to prove herself to him by donning the mantle of Daredevil while Matthew Murdock's in prison. I thought that was pretty cool. And so there you go.
So out of all those, which do you give the
the Lee Harvey Oswald revelation at the end of Department of Truth?
Yeah, that was a really cool one. I actually forgot about that one. I'm glad
that is a good one.
That one up. Yeah. All right, Manny, what do you have?
I just gave mine.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. All right, I guess it's my turn then. So yeah, I actually didn't have a lot here because this was kind of an easy one for me, but then I did think of a couple others that impacted me kind of like, and I can't believe I forgot the Department of Truth one. So I also had Wonder Woman kills the Batman who laughs. And part of the reason, because I dislike the Batman who laughs. So just to see him go away. And I share everything Boom said about Wonder Woman feeling relevant finally, and Batman who laughs, a super annoying, crappy character in my mind that would go away. But the fact that she did it with an invisible chainsaw that was using the lasso of truth as its like chain. I thought that was really great. I also thought it's kind of interesting. You had one where Thor gets Galactus's powers. I thought in the Fantastic Four Antithesis series from Mark Waid and Neil Adams, when Reed Richards gets the Galactus power, I thought that was a great moment because he got real big and it was still Reed Richards, you could tell, but he had the Galactus helmet, and the whole thing was, you have to read the series, but this Antithesis creature stole Galactus's power and he was worse than Galactus. So they were able to defeat him and the power was going to come back to Galactus. And at the last minute, Reed Richards diverts it into himself, knowing that it's going to kill him because he doesn't have, he's a mortal being and he doesn't have basically the structure, the physical structure to contain it. But he was willing to make that sacrifice because it would be getting rid of the Galactus and the universe would be safer without him in it. So that was a cool moment. It was just great to see. But ultimately, I got to go with something that ties into my best single issue or one shot. It's when Superboy Prime picks up the car right at the end of Dark Knight's Death Metal, The Secret Origin. He gets redeemed. He finally gets to go back home. And remember, when Superboy Prime was in that universe, when he was on Earth Prime supposedly is our actual real world, our real universe where there are no superpowers. It's just reality, basically. And he's finally back there. He's finally back home. He's with his friend, and they're walking down the street. And she calls out because there's a little boy that runs in the middle of the street chasing a ball, and he's about to get hit by a car. And Superboy Prime, remember, he's back in his own Earth Prime world where he's not supposed to have superpowers, but just with instinct from being an actual superhero for so long in the other dimensions, other parts of the DC multiverse where he was. He just reacts out of instinct and he runs over and he picks the car up. Even though he's not supposed to have superpowers, he picks the car up, and it's reminiscent of Action Comics #1. The car is even yellow, and it was just a great moment. It was the period at the end of the sentence, or the explanation point at the end of the sentence for Superboy's Prime redemption. And it was that moment where he's just like, it was great that he finally got his wish to go back home. But then you see, but he still has the powers. He could come back. We could see the true Superboy Prime, the heroic Superboy Prime that embodies all the best things of Superman. So yeah, no brainer for me. That was my best moment of 2020. It was fantastic. So, all right, I think it's Boom's turn to go first. Best storyline.
There was oh my God, there's so best storyline that concluded in 2020. Now, I didn't include any miniseries or maxi series in this category. I interpreted this, and maybe I interpreted it wrong, but that I considered storylines in some of the mainstream, like in in ongoing comic books, storylines that completed that I really enjoyed.
Yep.
That's how I interpreted it. And because of that, my choice is Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil. There was multiple story arcs that began and ended. And I don't know what it is about Daredevil, but Daredevil is a character that brings out the best in every writer that seems to, take on his mantle. And Chip Zdarsky has done an amazing job. And the character journey that he's put Matthew Murdock on, sort of giving up the mantle of Daredevil and ultimately going back to the streets and focusing on that, that good old fashioned Catholic guilt that Matthew Murdock's known for, and the character struggle that he has, and ultimately coming back and then factoring in Kingpin and corruption and taking it back to the streets and corrupt cops and weaving this massive tale. It was like reading a superhero version of The Godfather. And the storyline, even though the storyline is over, the story arc's completed and you felt like you read a good story, but you were excited to come back for more, and it's still carrying on forward into 2021. And even though Matthew Murdock is once again in jail, and you might think that's a cliche at this point because he's been in jail before, it feels fresh and new. And then of course into 2021 here, we've got Elektra as Daredevil, albeit likely temporarily. And the storyline just keeps getting better. But make no mistake, there were the storylines that completed, and there was a very much his redemption did begin, and it ended. He found his redemption, I believe, at the end of 2020, and part of that redemption is him entering a jail cell. And full compliments to Chip Zdarsky for pulling that off.
Yeah, it's been the series that I started reading that made me change my mind about Chip Zdarsky. I was never a fan of his work before. Even his Spider-Man life story kind of left me cold. But yeah, picking up Daredevil this year on your and Dark Knight Nation's recommendation, and it's turned me around. And then Stillwater's excellent as well. So maybe there is hope for Chip Zdarsky after all. All right, Manny, what do you have? Best storyline 2020?
This was such an easy pick for me that I once I had it, I was like, nope, nothing else. I don't care. My pick was Gideon Falls, by Jeff Lemire, yep. And then artwork by Andrea Sorrentino, Dave Stewart. You already know how much I love stories by Jeff Lemire, from everything he did with Bloodshot, The Valiant. We started over with the Terrifics as one of my favorite series over at DC, and that then was taken over. But just, Gideon Falls just keeps you on your toes. And this year more than ever, I think that just because of the way I had started having to do a lot of interviews for horror shows and things like that, I gained a lot more appreciation for the genre. And just the storytelling and the different perspectives. And unfortunately, it had to wrap up in December of last year. But what a story. I really don't want to talk too much about it, because I really feel like this is one that people need to pick up and read. Visually, it's so good also. Just the creepy wide smile, and sometimes even the darkness that uncovers it. Just overall, it complements each other so well. I just remembered loving every minute of it, and just being uncomfortable sometimes in some of those issues. So yeah, I just can't say enough about this book, and I don't want to talk any more about it, just because it's one of those books where it's like, just go get it, just go read it. You're gonna love it, and that's my pick.
Yeah, so mine was pretty easy too. Was the first one that popped into my mind, but I did want to give a shout out to, there was a 3-issue Flash story arc called With This Ring by Kevin Chenick, with art by Clayton Henry and Will Conrad. And Kevin Chenick is not really a comic writer, but he came in and kind of bridged a gap after Joshua Williamson's Flash was over, until Flash got involved in the Endless Winter event in December. And it was such a great storyline. Kevin Chenick did such a great job of making it feel like classic Barry Allen with the Rogues character, but he he leveled up the Rogue. He leveled up Dr. Alchemy to make him more of a threat than he ever had been. He was very respectful of the history of Barry Allen. Used a lot of the forensic stuff. And, the name with this ring, the flash ring, played a very important role. And so I just thought it was a really, really good job. And we had Kevin on to talk about it. So I wanted to mention that because it was one of the best storylines of 2020. And I think it definitely flew under the radar. But for me, the end of Christopher Cantwell's Doctor Doom with artwork by Salvador Larroca ended with issue 10. And it was the whole storyline, the whole Doctor Doom series, all 10 issues were so great from Cantwell and LaRocca. It starts off with, and spoilers if you haven't read it, because I'm going to talk about this because this was incredible. And it starts off where the neighboring country frames Doctor Doom for this horrific accident on the blue area of the moon, where Doctor Doom basically surrenders in order to keep his country from being invaded and the citizens being, having to be subject to war or attack or be harmed while they're trying to come and capture Doom. And Doom eventually escapes, and it's about him bringing to justice those people that were ultimately responsible and had framed him. But also Doom throughout this whole series has been getting these visions of a Doom from another part of the Marvel multiverse. There's this other Doom where he's no longer scarred and he's married and he has a couple sons and he's actually happy. He's not that, sarcastic, arrogant, over the top villain that we see him as. And he starts to think that, maybe this is my destiny, because that Doom is very much part of a united planet Earth, the ruling council of that planet Earth. And he's done great things and won the Nobel Peace Prize and all these great things, and the Earth is better off. And so our Doom thinks, that's what I need to aspire to. And at the very end, he comes face to face with that Doom in that reality, and he throws it all away. He's like, this is not who I am. He kills that Doom. He kills him. And it's like the whole time you thought this was some story about Christopher Cantwell turning Doom into a hero, Doom finally reaching his potential because of his incredible intellect and abilities. If only Doom could be a force for good. Think about all the good stuff he could do. We kind of saw a little bit of that in the infamous Iron Man. And so Cantwell he led us right up to the stream. And right when we were ready to get a drink, he just snatches it away and says, nope, Doom's who you thought he was all along. And it was absolutely incredible. It was so good. And it's this feel good story and you're rooting for Doom. And then at the end, he just flips you a bird and says, nope, I'm who you thought I was all along. And I'm Doom. Who did you think it was? And it was just so great. It was absolutely incredible. I highly recommend it. You're not going to get the heel turn if you heard this, because you've heard it here, but it's still totally worth the payoff. And the Salvador Larroca art is spectacular. So it was a no brainer for me. That's what I picked.
That's awesome.
All right. Up next, we have Best Sleeper or Surprise Hit, a comic that first appeared on the stands in 2020. What do you got, Boom?
Well, and this is the sleeper hit, and just to clearly define it, at least from my perspective, or what I understood, was that not enough people are reading. And for me, the sleeper hit that I think I don't think enough people were aware of or read was Devil's Highway published by Upshot. Written by Benjamin Percy, amazing art by Brent Schoonover, and colors by Nick Filardi. Devil's Highway is it's a story about a woman, sort of like she's a veteran of the army. She returns home to see her father. She's had a sort of a checkered past with her father, only to find out that her father hasn't been murdered. He works at a diner, and he ends up being murdered by a serial killer who happens to be a truck driver. And Benjamin Percy, he writes at the end of the first issue, he writes a story as to how he came up with the idea. And the idea generally being that being a truck driving life is the perfect place for serial killers to thrive, because you're always in a different place. You're never at one place for a long period of time. You can pick up who you want. You can dump bodies virtually anywhere. And that's why they call it the Devil's Highway. And this lead character, she's absolutely kick-ass. Brent Schoonover does such a fantastic job in the art, the detail on the pages when she does her investigations in this hometown and goes back and she puts the pieces together, and she sort of she not only kicks ass and deals with small town trash, but she knows how to deal with she's got compassion for the truck stop prostitutes, and there's so much character, so much great story in it. It's 4 issues long, and it ends with her, of course, ultimately finding the serial killer responsible. But of course, the larger story is that he's part of a larger network of serial killers on the Devil's Highway all across America. And so we got more stories to come. Sorry, it's 5 issues long. And anyways, just a really great story. Definitely, I would call a sleeper hit. Honorable mention goes to Resistance, also from Upshot, J. Michael Straczynski. I think a lot of people probably avoided this because it does deal with the pandemic, but one that is far more serious than the coronavirus. It deals with a pandemic that wipes out essentially 90% of the population of the planet. Those that survive are a fledgling few, and even fewer still gain superhuman powers. And of course, they bring their own kind of justice to a world that desperately needs it. And it's just very well written. And the others, I got some other honorable mentions, but I'm going to stick with those. I'm going to stick with Devil's Highway is by far my first pick, followed by Resistance.
Yeah, there's a few AWA Upshot titles that I've been enjoying, and they're definitely, as the name is, they're definitely on the upswing, Upshot. And like I have Percy's Year Zero, like ready to read. I was hoping to actually read it before we did the awards. I didn't get a chance to, but yeah, they're coming up. I wouldn't be surprised to have a few of their books on my list myself next year. What did you have, Manny, for sleeper or surprise hit?
Well, I picked one that I thought was going to be a surprise hit, and it's mind-boggling a little bit that more people aren't necessarily talking about it. And you and I had this conversation a little bit earlier, but I ultimately went with the other history of the DC universe, just because of the way that a lot of those moments that we're already familiar with are taking place in this book. I know that there's a lot of impactful moments that I saw, especially in the book, and even the way that John Ridley describes John Stewart from the eyes of Jefferson Pierce, that was phenomenal. And just the way that they made his life important, as to some of the ways that they described the Justice League and those heroes, and just that perspective is so different than what we were used to seeing, that I thought it'd be getting a lot more buzz than really what it has. So especially nowadays when it's in, a lot of people are looking for this type of media where you have a lot more inclusion. You're looking at some of the quote unquote lesser characters, even though for me, Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning is a top notch hero, just for what he does as a teacher, and then also as a superhero, as a mentor. And I mean, it's so important that we saw Batman have him train some of the outsiders, because he thought it'd be a better teacher than he could be for them. So that's ultimately why I picked this book. Just, I mean, John Ridley is an acclaimed writer, and I thought that there'd be more to it, but whatever. I guess it's comic books for you sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like the delay, which I totally understand the delay. John Ridley wanted to take his time and do more research, and it was worth it. The book is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the problem is that whole comic book marketing thing, where the only thing they ever market is the first issues. And I feel like everybody who read the book and all the reviews I saw talked about it as one of the best books of 2020, but I didn't see enough fans reacting to it. So I don't know. Maybe it's a tough sell. I don't know what the problem was. Maybe it's the price point of $8 or whatever. But yeah, great pick. That was on my list also for surprise hit. Also, Man, it's just so tough. So tough to just choose one book. So I think, I said I didn't have a tie, but I guess I do, because I just can't. So I hadn't selected. I have it between two, and I was going to choose when we got to it, but I haven't, and I'm not going to. I'm going to end up having a tie. So let me mention a couple honorable mentions first. So Juggernaut by Fabian Nicieza and Ron Garney.
That's a good one.
That was a big surprise for me, because I'm not a big fan of a Juggernaut, and I've never cared about the Juggernaut. And this book made me care about the Juggernaut. So that was a surprise for me that it was so good. Juggernaut on kind of a road to redemption was a thing I didn't expect. Spider-Woman by Carla Pacheco and Pierre Perez. I've always enjoyed Spider-Woman as a character, but I didn't expect this book to be that good. Carla Pacheco gives her a great voice. So that I thought was really great. Also, the Black Widow series by Kelly Thompson and art by Elena Casagrande has been a big surprise. Wonderful Adam Hughes covers. Kelly Thompson is telling a more interesting Black Widow story than I've ever read before. Usually it's all Cold War espionage kind of things. She's humanizing her, bringing in a family and other things that make her more relatable. And Elena Casagrande, her art is so much better than the last time I saw her. Not that her art was bad before, but this is like outstanding art. And sometimes she'll do double or triple exposures, kind of like Mikkel Yanin, so you can see movement, which really shows off the skills and the martial artistry of Black Widow. Last time I saw Elena Casagrande's art was in the Vigilante Southland series. And she's gotten so much better since then. And granted, that was 3 or 4 years ago. So that was really great. I almost thought about picking that. But ultimately, I'm going to go with two that are really great. One of them, not necessarily a sleeper, but a surprise hit, because again, I'm surprised that I like it. And longtime listeners of the podcast will know that I'm surprised that I would ever like a Joker Harley book. I don't like Joker. I don't like Harley. I really don't like Joker. So you put them together in a book, Joker Harley Criminal Sanity. Why did I even check it out? Well, because it's got Miko Suyan and Jason Badower art, which is next level stuff. Reminds me so much of what Miko was able to do in the Bloodshot book when he was teamed up with Louis LaRosa, the Jeff Lemire Bloodshot Salvation. And so this was written by Cami Garcia. And I know Boom's a big fan of this also. And, it's not zany Harley. It's not Harley being crazy. It's not Harley, no, Mr. J. No, it's Harley as an intelligent, strong, sophisticated, relevant, flawed criminal profiler going after a realistic Joker, not a crazy, hey, I'm just going to kill people for the sake of killing people. It's interesting. It's complex. It's cerebral. And the art is next level. And it's cat and mouse. And finally, in the last issue, we got a hint that maybe we are going to go a little bit of the way toward, more of the traditional Harley, which I'm sure will please Harley fans, with the Joker actually kind of starting to pull her strings a little bit, which I didn't think we were necessarily going to see. So I had to give it a nod because I didn't want to not mention it as just an incredible surprise to me, how much I love this book. And I didn't pick up the first issues. I didn't pick it up, I think, until issue 4. And I was like, I'd heard from a few people that thought it was really good. And I'm like, you know what, let me give this a try. Even though I don't like Joker or Harley, I thought, well, let me read a few pages. And I was just immediately tractor beam sucked me right in, went back and read the first 3. And it's every time it comes out, it's one of the first books I'd read that week. So I had to mention that. And then the other one I've mentioned already, I'll give it a proper shout out here, Miles to Go by B. Claymore and Stephen Molnare, about a girl at a very young age, like 11, 12 years old, witnesses a hit taking place, gets taken in as kind of an apprentice by this hitman, teaches her everything she needs to know. She abandoned life. She's tried to have a family. She has a little girl, and all of a sudden her past starts catching up to her when her mentor is killed. And it's crime noir. The art by Stephen Molnare is so amazing, and it fits the characterization so well, to the point where in the first issue, you see Amara Bishop talking to her estranged husband on the phone, and they're both standing in their respective kitchens. And Amara's kitchen is immaculate, right? And it speaks to who she is as a person. It gives you characterization that you're not even realizing you're seeing. And then the scene shifts to her husband's kitchen, and there's dirty dishes everywhere, and pizza boxes. And as they're talking, as it flips back and forth between these two scenes, of their respective kitchens, and they're talking. You can hear it in the dialogue. You can hear it in the context of what's being said and what's not being said, of why they're estranged. And it's the little things like that that it makes this type of sequential storytelling, what makes comic books amazing, because it's not overt. We're not having to be told in these dialogue boxes that, hey, she split up with this guy because she didn't want to be his mom and clean up after him. She wasn't getting enough from him. And it's shown in the art by Stephen Molnare. And that's just one example of the way that type of art kind of enhances the storytelling that B. Claymore is giving us. So it's an Aftershock book, miles to go. It's a 5-issue mini, would have completed in 2020, but with the pandemic, we only had 3 issues, so we have 2 more to go. I've already talked to B. Clay. He's been on the show before. He's going to come back when it's all over and talk to us about the series. I cannot recommend it enough. I cannot recommend it enough. If you like comic books, especially if you're a fan of things that Sean Phillips and Brubaker do, that crime stuff, go and pick this up, man. I promise you, you will absolutely love this book. It is so damn good. And the whole mystery of who's after her and how it ties in, shadowy figures and the National Security Agency and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really good. So that's my pick for Sleeper, because again, not enough people are checking it out. All right, best ongoing comic. So this is one that didn't necessarily have to start last year. I can't remember whose turn it is to go first, so I'll throw it over to you, Manny. What do you got?
Easy pick.
I already
the Eisner Award-winning Image comic, Bitter Root.
Really? That's not.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Ice Cream Man.
No. Ice Cream Man's great, and I gave it its nod.
Okay.
But Bitter Root for me, it has just so much more. Well, okay. An easy second would be Ice Cream Man, and to be honest with you, I had it on my original list for my pick for best ongoing, because of the fact that how different each story is, how you can vary from topic to topic, and every month you're going to get a different flavor, which is why it's called what it's called. It was still surrounding the same theme, very a la Twilight Zone, Black Mirror, things like that are so popular these days. Hell, we even have one in Spanish, but it's been so popular that now that variant covers are coming out, Dr. Seuss ones, and I think there's very different ones that have been very, very fun. So but I cannot say that the best book for me, and obviously for a lot of people, because it's an Eisner Award winner, Bitter Root by David F. Walker, Chuck Brown, Stanford Green. The book takes place in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance, and it's about the Sangari family, and they're trying to save the world from supernatural forces that are threatening to destroy humanity. Unfortunately, these forces are powered by hatred, by all kinds of negative feelings, and what do you usually see when you're thinking about African American relationships with other cultures? And during this time, there's a lot of hatred. There's that. There's segregation, and so they have to deal with that. And what I really like about that is that they're trying to do this the right way. And David Walker also makes sure to add a little bit of heart with it, with the grandma, with making sure that, yes, the fight's important, but here and there they'll sprinkle in the fact that they need to help their others. They need to help the people, the community. They do like soup kitchens and things like that to help out. And then in the meantime, they have kind of this almost like I don't know what to call it. Just they have all kinds of weapons, and it's just super fun to read, and very, very I think a good book, especially for this day and age, because it has a little bit of everything, and it's just, in my opinion, very, very well done. And so it's a complete book, and I'm just, the only thing that I don't like about it, and this is just me nitpicking, is the fact that it's not a little bit more, it doesn't come out very often. The last issue we saw was in September. Next one we're going to see is not till April, then March, and then April. I wish you had more of it, but you know what? Sometimes you gotta wait for the good things, and I'll be a little bit of patient for Bitterroot. I love it.
Good pick. Good pick. What about you, Boom?
Well, for best ongoing, the I guess the great thing about this is that I already did the best storyline, and I chose Daredevil. I could easily pick Daredevil for best ongoing. It's a candidate, but this allows me to talk about Something is Killing the Children, which I think deserves special notice because something has to be said about James Tynion in the fourth here. I actually think his Batman run was pretty good, but I will say that the people who criticize his Batman run and thought that the pacing could have been different and that it ended in disappointment and there were some detractors. Everything that whatever you might have perceived his Batman run that may have been lacking, his Something is Killing the Children is just on another level entirely. It's absolutely fantastic. The premise of Something is Killing the Children, you got a woman by the name of Erica Slaughter that goes around America and basically her job is to kill monsters. And the funny thing about monsters is that only children can see monsters. And it sounds like such a ridiculous premise. It's the boogeyman and only the children can see the boogeyman. So how can that be interesting? What he does was in such spectacular and horrific fashion. The violence is incredible. And it's so beautifully and horrifically drawn by Werther Dell'Edera. And it feels like a horror comic. And the character moments of a mother waiting in a gym, waiting outside a school gymnasium to be asked to come in to view the body of her dead child that's been killed by a monster. The emotions that you see on the face, the tension, the pacing between the panels, the darkness and the shadows, and the sudden appearance of these monsters that only children can see, and then adults can see them under very specific circumstances. And when those circumstances arise, there are moments, and you want to talk about just epic moments or scene stealers that just captivate you. I had the honor of reading 8 issues in a row, and I'm so glad I did because I was captivated. I can't say enough about Something is Killing the Children. You will appreciate James Tynion much more if you read this series, and that's definitely my choice for best ongoing.
So my thing with the only issue I had with his Batman run is I thought that it was just at the wrong time. I think by the time his run came out, and Jason and I had talked about this, we were pretty fed up with the Joker, and we were seeing kind of similar storylines again, where he's chasing Batman. They're doing the whole the theater thing, and going back to his family, and with Jason Todd and Batgirl, something similar. We were also looking at seeing the 3 Jokers, and it was kind of just we're ready to put the Joker to bed for a little while. But there is something to say about the introduction of Punchline, the introduction of Clown Hunter, and also kind of setting up that new Gotham that's more anti-vigilante and a little bit more to the world that we're living in, to make a little bit more relevant. So that was my only thing about it. If it maybe came out earlier and it didn't coincide so much with 3 Jokers, which I blame that book particularly because it should have came out years ago. I think probably my love for it would be a lot higher. James Tynion is definitely one of those that I had down for best writer. I'm not gonna say who wins, if he did or someone else, but he's done a lot of good. He did a lot of good work in 2020.
Yeah, I'll say one thing about James Tynion, you hear so many creators that they don't want to create any new characters for their companies because they don't own it, so they want to do it only in creator owned. James Tynion does not have that fear, man. Yeah. Clown Hunter, Punchline, Ghostmaker. And now just today, I think the announcement came out today. I got the press release today. There's going to be a new character coming out in Batman called Miracle Molly. So again, like he's just putting it all out there, man. Yeah. And you can't fault him for that. So yeah. Were you going to say something else, Boom?
No, that's I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right. Best ongoing comic. So this was really tough for me. I in order to narrow it down for myself, because we had just about all those best new comics I mentioned are ongoing. So, I could have put Spider-Woman, I could have put Iron Man, I could have put Black Widow. They don't have a huge amount of issues. Spider-Woman more than most. So I could have put any of those, but I ultimately I didn't, because again, I want to give some nods to some other things I haven't mentioned. Daredevil's on my list that Boom talked about earlier. Once in Future, Kieran Gillen and Dan Morrow is on my list. That's an incredible book. Also, Detective Comics, Peter J. Tomasi and Brad Walker is on my list, and that's an incredible book. But ultimately, I didn't give that the nod because they're off the book now, coming March. I also think Catwoman by Ram V and Fernando Blanco is one of the best books on stands right now. But they only started in issue 25, so they've only done a handful of issues as well. But man, if you're a fan of things like Heat or Manhunter, like Michael Mann type movies, Collateral with Jamie Foxx and Tom Cruise, like you need to be reading Catwoman. It is a Michael Mann movie in a comic book version. It's so amazing. So there's a lot that I could have chose from. Die. Did I mention Die from Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans? That's an incredible book. But ultimately what I gave, because I didn't have anywhere else to put it, and it's totally worthy, it's Kelly Thompson and Lee Garbett on Captain Marvel. I've read plenty of Captain Marvel. I read Kelly Sue DeConnick's run. I read Margaret Stoll's run. And I liked it well enough, but it never got me excited for Captain Marvel. I always felt like I prefer Carol Danvers to be Miss Marvel or even Binary. I'm such a fan of Marvel as a character, Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel. And so to me, he's should be the only Captain Marvel. I didn't even like it when we had Monica Rambeau take the Captain Marvel moniker, even though she wasn't anything to do with the Kree version. And now we have Carol Danvers, and turns out she's half Kree. And, she always had that connection. Even when she got her powers as Miss Marvel, before they retconned it to make her half Kree, it had to do with her being caught in an explosion with Captain Marvel. So she always had that connection. But all that to say, I've never really cared as much about Captain Marvel. I've been excited to read the book until I've been reading Kelly Thompson and Lee Garbett's run. And even when I've read the first couple, when she came back to Earth, the first arc or two, it was like, yeah, it's okay. But Kelly Thompson has evolved into the character, and she's made it a character that I really care about. And I'm enjoying it more so than I've ever enjoyed a Captain Marvel book before. Introducing her sister, who I mentioned before, best new character. Yeah, it's a really great book. And I think Lee Garbett captures the action. It's very kinetic, a lot of big, cosmic fights, because Captain Marvel is a very powerful character. So it needs to have those big over the top action scenes, and Lee Garbett captures that very well. So yeah, Captain Marvel, I put it here because it's not a sleeper. It is a pretty well selling book. A lot of people know about it. And I think it's the best ongoing, other than things that, maybe we already mentioned. I probably could have gave it to Daredevil, the same as Boom said, but I'm giving the nod to Captain Marvel. I think it's a really, really great book. So,
well, I would add that one category that we don't have is underrated writer. Kelly Thompson isn't my choice for best writer, but she's absolutely she's very much underrated. She deserves some kudos. I think she's really she's written above her pay grade, I think. And her Captain Marvel, to her credit, she's introduced some new characters. She's gotten the speculation market captivated. She's really done a good job. She's got a great attitude on Twitter. She gives great interviews. She engages with fans. I know she engages with Professor Bill at Comic Book University that I interact with from time to time. And she's done an interview with him. And like I said, I think I share your thoughts in regard to her talents.
Yeah, she's going to be on the show too. We've been going back and forth trying to figure out a time, so she'll be on.
Right on. I look forward to that.
All right, up next, I think it's my turn to go first. Let's see. We have best graphic novel or graphic album. So it can be an original graphic novel or like a trade or an art book or something like that. And if this was 2021, it would be such an easy pick for me. Because I just got Lee Bermejo's art book in the other day. It's pride of place in my collection, but it actually ended up being a pretty easy pick for me anyway. So I don't read a lot of graphic novels. I do buy a few collected editions here or there. I buy a few art books. A lot of those I buy when I go to conventions and I meet a creator or something catches my eye. It's a great deal. Obviously that didn't happen this year. I just didn't read a lot of graphic novels this year, but there were two that I read. Well, there are more than two that I read, but there's two that I read that I want to mention. So first, I'll mention Firepower. I mentioned it as a possibility for best new series. So originally what Robert Kirkman was going to do is he's going to release the first issue of Firepower on New Comic Book Day. And then he was going to release the free Comic Book Day version of Firepower. And also on the same day, release a prelude original graphic novel. So he talked to a bunch of retailers and they said, what do you not like about free Comic Book Day? Hey, why don't you pick up this, this is a Robert Kirkman thing, guy that did Walking Dead. You read it and you think, okay, well, how did he get these powers? Oh, well, you call a comic book store, you go back and they say, oh yeah, we have this graphic novel you can buy that explains how he got to the place where he's at in the first issue. Well, we didn't have free Comic Book Day and all those plans kind of got thrown out the window. So it's really unfortunate because Kirkman does care a lot about retailers and was trying to help them out. So they ended up still releasing that free Comic Book Day just as kind of a promo thing. And then they re-released it as a first issue with some extras in the back matter. But you also could still get the original graphic novel Firepower, which is the prelude, which is really great. And it sets up the ongoing series, which is a really great series. And everything I said before applies. If you're a fan of David Carradine, Kung Fu, martial artists, that kind of thing. Chris Samnee. I've never been a big fan of Samnee, but the art here is pitch perfect. And Owen Johnson, I could have put him on my list for best new heroes. His interesting, and his family and his kids and everything are compelling. So I thought about that, but ultimately it was an easy choice. I chose from Aftershock, Kill a Man, written by Steve Orlando and Philip Kennedy Johnson with art by Alec Morgan. We had Philip Kennedy Johnson on not too long ago. We talked about this briefly. Steve Orlando is going to be coming on in a couple of weeks, and I'm sure we'll talk more about Kill a Man then. Basically, the premise is there's a fighter who's gets outed as homosexual right as he's about to get his shot at the title. And the reason it's so painful for him is because his dad was killed by a fighter who got outed as a homosexual in the ring in a boxing match. And now that this guy's been outed and his reputation's been destroyed, the only person he can get to train him for his title shot is the guy that killed his father. So as messed up as that is, it makes for a great story when you're dealing with, things like bigotry and prejudice. Steve Orlando himself is a gay man. Philip Kennedy Johnson's into MMA. When Philip Kennedy Johnson was on, he was talking about how they kept each other from straying too far down the path one way or the other, and kept it kind of, right in the sweet spot where it needed to be. It's an incredible, poignant story, very emotional, well done. The fight scenes are all very visceral. And yeah, it was I could have put this on Sleeper Surprise Hit too, because it really kind of blew me away. One of those things where I'm like, Aftershock, let me go ahead and, read the preview they sent me. And I just immediately got sucked in and had to order a physical copy for my bookshelf. So that was my pick for best graphic novel. What do you have up on your list, Boom?
For best graphic novel, this wasn't really a contest, but I'll say my two runners up first. The first one is Earth One, Volume 2 of Earth One Green Lantern by Gabriel Hardman and Karina Bechko, with colors by Jordan Boyd. This was just excellent, and I want to make sure that Gabriel Hardman and Karina Bechko both were writers on this. Gabriel Hardman complained on Twitter the other day that not enough people realize that he's also the writer on it, not just the artist. And in any event, in my view, it's the most, it does Green Lantern better than the mainstream DC universe. I think it's very interesting. I like the way they address the Green Lantern mythology, the way they introduce the Sinestro Corps in Volume 2 is just excellent. It's a great story. The art is fantastic. If you feel overwhelmed by the mainstream DC universe, Green Lantern mythology, just pick up the Earth One, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 2 came out in August of 2020. And I would definitely recommend you pick it up. It's well worth it. The other one is by Kelly. I actually just have it. It's downstairs. I finally bought it because I read it digitally, and I just bought it last week. It's the Dracula one by it has this 4-letter word, Dracula. Oh man. It's I'm forgetting the name of it. I think it's Kelly it's Kelly Sue DeConnick, and the artist is particularly good. It's what is it here? Just see. Anyways, I don't want to take up this is going to bother the hell out of me. I'll have to come back to it, but in any event, I'll come back to it. Dracula, it's Dracula Mother Effer. That's what it is. It's Dracula Mother Effer. And it's the artistically, it's fantastic. And I just want to give credit here to the I don't know why, because it takes place in the 1970s, and it's just artistically, the color scheme is just incredible. I remember reading, I spent a half hour just reading the color scheme and how they went about doing it at the end. And
Alex DeCampi and Eric.
Yes,
Henderson.
Alex DeCamp. Thank you. And you have the colorist name?
Yeah, Erica Henderson.
Erica Henderson. Thank you. Highly recommend that. If you see it, it's in hardcover form. If you see it in your comic shop, if you just page through it, you'll want to just stare at the pages. It really is great. And it's just, Dracula is more of a psychological entity in it. He's a powerful entity rather than a physical form. So it's not Dracula how you traditionally think of Dracula. And it's very much sort of I guess, the females that are seduced by Dracula ultimately become the heroes. And it's just an interesting take on female empowerment, while at the same time viewing Dracula as more of a sexual psychological entity. And it's just, and then the color scheme, it just, and the layout, it's very different. And when I read it digitally on my iMac here in the big 27-inch, it's just gorgeous to read. And it's quite the experience. Finally, my pick is Pulp. Brian, number one, my hands down, Pulp by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Sean Phillips, amazing art. Pulp is the story of an old gunfighter from the West from the 1870s and 80s who lives all the way into the 1930s, where he's very much an old man, and he's outlived his own life because he thought he would die a gunfighter because he had a very, very harsh life, and he thought he would live by the gun, die by the gun, but he didn't. He continued to live, and he became an old man in the 1930s, and he ends up becoming a writer in the 1930s, making money on the side. And ultimately he ends up meeting with one of his old enemies, one of the Pinkertons that used to hunt him down during the Old West, and they actually become friends. And it's a tale of friendship and an evaluation of one's life, and a tale of one's own personal judgment and guilt about the life lived, and looking back, and how the story ends, and what he does at the end, and how it ends is such a typical Ed Brubaker story, beautifully drawn by Sean Phillips. The way that he captures the imagery and the mood and the downtrodden, depressing aspect of this man's life, but also the heroism. Pulp is hands down the best graphic novel that I read in 2020.
All right, Manny. Well, actually, real quick before I'll just comment. So yeah, man, everybody tells me how much I need to be reading Brubaker and Phillips, and I don't. And I know I do. It's a big hole in my stuff. So I'm hoping to maybe 2021 I want to start reading more standalone graphic novels, because there's so much stuff out there other than superheroes. I need to expose myself to more stuff. And on that same note, yeah, the Dracula Mother Effer, yeah, Alex DeCampi. I heard about that book, and I heard a lot of people saying how amazing it was. I hadn't even looked at it, and I was looking at the colors right now. You're right. They are amazing. It's probably something I should check out. All right, Manny, what do you got?
So I have a biased pick just because I was sent one. So my pick actually is Dark Horse's Critical Role Vox Machina Origins Library Edition, Series 1 and 2. And the funny thing is I already had Volume 1, Series 1 and 2 individually on hardcover. But then a friend of ours, Chris Northrup, let me know that they were actually going to be releasing the library edition, which is a bigger version than what we are traditionally used to seeing in comic books. And I have to say the pages in these books look beautiful. And what ties it all in a bow is I'm a big fan of Critical Role. I'm a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. So having to be able to have this book and, you know, knowing some of the people that worked on it, I've interviewed Jody Hauser on her work on it as well. It was just great to have. It has a note on the beginning by Gail Simone talking about her love for it as well. But if you're a fan of Dungeons and Dragons, if you're a fan of Critical Role, which is just blowing up, this is something you must have, and it's beautiful. Just to experience a comic book in that way, it's not something that you see every day. Usually, comic books come obviously in the traditional size, but this is a lot bigger. It's a hardcover. It feels so much more, and it's actually not even that badly priced on for what it is, all of it. So for that, that's my pick.
All right, part one, last choice here, and then we'll save the rest, the other 11, for part two. So the final category for this particular episode is best or favorite cover. Man, this was another tough one. I'll just
so hard. This is such a tough one.
Yeah, I was talking to Manny about this before we started recording, and I was like, you know, I almost feel like we need to limit it and say, okay, no variants, because there's too many covers. I was looking, trying to go through and look at all the covers from 2020 last night. Man, I didn't even get through 2 months of covers. There's so many covers now. We talk about retailer variants and tiered variants, and oh man, it's insane. But I don't want to limit it like that, because almost every one of my picks for best cover is a variant. And the other part, there's so many good. I know I left many covers that I loved off my list just because I forgot. So it's one of those things where I need to, like, every month or every week, if a cover catches my eye, I need to write it down so that when I go at the end of the year, I can go back and go, oh yeah, I remember that cover. It was great. So yeah, really, really tough category. And this is another one I'm not even 100% sure what I'm going to pick yet. So I'm going to let you go first, Boom.
Okay, well, I actually did put a lot of thought into this, and it might not seem that way. And of course, obviously, we should say the obvious, that art is so subjective. I'm going to pick a very controversial choice, and that I love this series, image series called The Marked. And Brian Haberlin's cover for issue number 9 consists of a beautifully painted cover. It's The Marked issue number 9, Brian Haberlin cover, and it's a redhead with her both her hands sort of cupping her face. And what I think, it's just an absolutely eye-catching, gorgeous cover. And the reason why I say it's very controversial is that there is a rumor that he basically pirated from a photograph pirated the picture from a photograph of an actual photographer. And I forget the photographer's name, but I don't care. I love the cover. And that's why I said it's maybe a controversial, an outlier choice, but it's definitely got attention. And if you Google The Marked number 9, not only is it a great series, but this particular cover, and it has it has a virgin cover as well, which is quite a collectible, but absolutely gorgeous. And I, my favorite, well, I don't want to get into another category of my favorite cover artist, but I'm a huge Lucio Perillo fan. I've got tons of his covers. I love Frank Cho. I love, Yeah, you got the marked cover there. Yeah, it's gorgeous. There's so many cover artists that I love, but the one by Brian Haberlin here, just absolutely gorgeous. And the redhead on the cover has, she's got tattoos on her arms and this piercing sort of bluish, sort of maybe a little bit of green in her eyes. Truly a gorgeous cover. And just so for people know, the reason why she's got tattoos is because the tattoos in the series called The Marked, the tattoos are a form of magic. You utilize tattoos. They're called The Marked because depending on the type of tattoo you have, it defines the type of magic that you're capable of wielding, in a nutshell. I'm oversimplifying it, but that's kind of the premise of the story. And it's, it's a tough category, but I had to pick one, and that was my choice.
All right. Yeah, I like it. What about you, Manny?
For me, I just picked something that I've just really enjoyed, really liked. And so for that, I had to go with, let me pull out my notes now because I can't find it. I want to make sure I give the right credit. The cover for The Other History of the DC Universe #1 by Giuseppe Camuncoli and Marco Maestrazzo. And obviously that's the one with the classic Black Lightning. And he has the lightning bolt coming up. And I just think it's great. I like the coloring in it. I like the background, the lightning bolt that's emitting from his hand, the classic suit with it kind of opening and showing his chest while you can still see the lightning bolts coming up, the collar, just a facial expression. The whole thing is just such a good piece of art that it was hard for me to pick anything else.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. Yeah.
With that said, I did like some of the covers also for specifically one for Batman 3 Jokers, and that's the one with the fish. It's just something that is dear to me because of the animated series. That's a honorable mention, but this cover right here, it's gorgeous, and I plan on, if there's a print for it or something like that, it's definitely something that I plan on acquiring, especially because Black Lightning right now is a one of my favorite characters. I enjoy the series a lot. I enjoy seeing him in comics, and I've had the pleasure of talking and being in the presence of Cress Williams a few times. So yeah, that's my pick.
This was, like I said, so hard. So hard. I have many to pick from here. Let me get my list. So, and then I'll read off. So yeah, I thought about doing Spider-Man Noir from Dan Panosian. I thought that was a really great cover, black and white. It was a 1 of 25. I didn't end up buying it because it was way too expensive, but it's very Will Eisner-esque with the Spider-Man Noir sort of, part of the building there. So that was one that immediately came to mind. I also thought that the Snake Eyes Dead Game variant from Miko Suyan, it's kind of homages the first appearance of Cable. I thought that was great, but that was just a retailer variant. So ultimately I didn't pick that because I thought, well, not a lot of people are even going to have seen that, but I mean, it's Miko Suyan. So, that's really great. He always does spectacular covers. There's a Two-Face cover by one of my favorite artists, Lee Bermejo. That's maybe the best Two-Face image I've ever seen from Detective Comics, where he's holding a coin that's scarred up and you see him in the background kind of, grimacing, giving us that Two-Face, like the most realistic looking Two-Face, that we've ever seen, like really, really spectacular. There's also a great Captain Marvel variant for Captain Marvel 16 from another of my favorite cover artists, Mark Brooks, which really showcases Carol being part of the Marvel Universe. She's even holding Captain America's shield. It's very colorful. You see Thor, She-Hulk, Captain America, and Black Panther in the background. So I considered that. I thought it was just really, really great. Then what else? The Immortal She-Hulk by In-Hyuk Lee, where it homages her original first appearance in She-Hulk #1.
Man, that was a good one.
It was really, really great. I almost picked that. And there was a couple of Wonder Woman 750s that I almost picked. Nicola Scott continuing her series of doing these covers where there's a bunch of different covers, basically a bunch of different versions of Wonder Woman throughout the years. So I thought that one was really great. And then Jim Lee has a triptych that he did for Torpedo Comics, where it's basically Wonder Woman kind of over the years. So he's got one of her kind of in her golden age costume, and then there's one where she's in a more modern costume, which would be that one. And then the last one, where she's on the other side, which is a little more Liam Sharp inspired. So and those three all go together. So I thought those were all really great. But ultimately what I chose was Jeremy Roberts. He did 3 covers for Suicide Squad, and they kind of go together. And they're all focused on Deadshot, who, if you read Tom Taylor's Suicide Squad run, you know he will have met his untimely demise. And so that's what I picked. The Suicide Squad Jeremy Roberts covers. They're just dynamic. They're beautiful, kind of photorealistic, but a lot of flames, a lot of cool costumes, a lot of detail. And I think Jeremy Roberts is a very underrated artist. So that's what I went with, the Suicide Squad Jeremy Roberts 456 series. I thought it was just spectacular. But again, I mean, this list was by far the hardest. I mean, I'm looking at covers that in previous years I would have just been like drooling over, and I'm just like, yeah, that one's okay. That one's okay. We are so spoiled with the quality of covers that we get in comics nowadays. It's really quite disgusting, actually, how good the covers are. And I'm sure we'll talk more about it when we get to favorite cover artist. In fact, what I originally picked for my best cover for 2020, I had a different book. And then I realized, that came out in November of 2019, so I couldn't pick it. But when I saw this cover, I literally out loud, I was like, holy shit. Like it floored me. It was so damn good. So man, there are some great covers. So we're ultimately not going to limit it to non-variants or what have you, but I just need to start writing down each month what are the covers that caught my eye, so I don't have to try to go through, 2,000 covers at the end of the year.
There's one category of cover that it's not a category, but I want to give Department of Truth a shout out, because the covers for the Department of Truth, the themes that they have, like, it has a very unique style. I love, and I know that James Tynion also contributed to contributed to the artist Martin Simmons on Department of Truth, the way that it looks like the newspaper clippings, and the way, weaving all the conspiracy theories and the pictures of JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald on the various variant covers for Department of Truth. It has each issue has that same similar sort of style of mirror imaging newspaper clippings, and I think it really enhances the story. And I think that it's a unique kind of cover, because in this day and age, covers often might look really great, but they don't always reflect the story itself. Whereas I think Department of Truth, the reason why I'm giving that a shout out for its covers is that the cover itself actually enhances the mood and the tone of the story, which I think is very rare.
Yeah. And Manny, I would have thought you would have gone to Ice Cream Man. Those Dr. Seuss Ice Cream Man covers were pretty fantastic.
Yeah, they were fun. Just not as impactful as the Black Lightning one that I just really liked a lot more. Yeah. Like, if thinking about, like, if there's something that's going to go on my wall, it's going to be the Black Lightning one. As fun as those other ones are.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks to my co-host for joining me. We'll be back with part 2 soon. I promise you won't have to wait long. And when we release these, we'll release them on back-to-back days. But yeah, we're already about 2 hours now, so that's plenty long enough. We'll be back with the other 11 picks. I imagine it'll go a little quicker for those. So once again, we want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.